Hi, I'm Justin Lowe.
And my name is Jonah Freeman, and we are here to discuss our exhibit Sunset Corridor at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. A lot of this exhibit comes out of this period in which we had a studio at an abandoned IBM business park in Kingston, New York. We had 45,000 square feet in this, what was, the offices of IBM that started in the 50s, and it's where they developed the mainframe computers and the air defense system and video conferencing and all kinds of things that are just part of the fabric of our information world now. But it all started there. So it was sort of an auspicious place for us to start to do our work for Sunset Corridor, which the theme of which, starting with The Cell and the Smile and continuing through Colony Sound, was really centered around information technology.
Yeah, it was kind of a ready-made set for us, and we had free range and access to places that nobody would normally have access to, all of the data centers and various offices and cafeterias, and we could just sort of prop around, so much of it was already so cinematic that was the initial kind of cue.
For me, having come from film, I went to film school, and although I never tried to go into commercial filmmaking per se, I was always interested in work that would stand in the contemporary art realm, museums and galleries, but film and video was always part of it. And I often thought about installation as a way to create these kind of narrative sets, as it were, in like sequences of rooms that could sort of function like a three-dimensional expanded cinema space. And so when Justin and I started working together and our ambitions grew into these much more expansive environments, we often referred to these as kind of sequences, like you'd move through a sequence in a film, sort of time-based, experiential sculpture.
In our early days, I remember us just walking down the street and with a video camera and taking shop windows as if they were kind of like museological vitrines or displays, and seeing what would happen as you move from one store with one identity to another store with another identity. And that then became a kind of basis to storyboard.
Look at that.
Wow. That is weird.
No people.
Just robots. I think about like Rosenberg and combines and this idea of bringing the world into the studio, and this idea of like a hybridized object, which is what we talk about quite a bit, so that these spaces are usually hybridized in their use value, like some place was taken over by another group. And you find this just down the street here, where banks are now Rite Aids, or banks that were Rite Aids are now, maybe something else. There's this constant cycling through of identities. And I think that not only Rosenberg, but some of the happenings like Alan Capro, or some of the architectural interventions by Gordon Matta Clark, these were all places that we really started with, but then took on to different kind of trajectories.
For me, I was very influenced by what I guess you would consider like the sort of post-minimal strain of environmental sculpture, Dan Graham, Robert Irwin. I was a guard at DIA, so I spent a lot of time in both of their works. And when I was in college, I had a very transformative experience at a Bruce Nauman retrospective at MoMA, where I went into his piece, The Yellow Room Triangular. And I remember just sort of standing in the corner and be like, well, what am I looking at? And there was other people in the room, and you're sort of forced to look at them. And I'm like, oh, it was one of those like aha moments. Like art can be not just looking at an object that an artist made, but just sort of putting you in a situation where your focus is shifted somewhere else. And so that impulse, I think, really sparked the interest in using environments as a way to sort of try to like push the attention and experience in directions you may not normally do as you're just looking at a painting or a sculpture.
I think that you could also look at something like The Happenings and how that influenced kind of dropout culture. For instance, Drop City, which was a commune that was started by a bunch of artists that were involved in the happenings and then created their own intentional community. And the architecture of that was really kind of like busted up old VW cars that were then modified into triangles to create these kind of geodesic domes to do a kind of a southwest Buckminster Fuller. And so that's where you get the geodesic dome structures that have entered into our installations. There's sort of a nod to that dropout kind of counterculture community.
Early on, we decided to take this fictional notion of California called San as the umbrella for all the installations and films and all the work that we were making together in this collaborative project. And San is a notion that San Diego to San Francisco became one giant city, one megalopolis. And that was something that was put forth by Anthony Weiner and Herman Kahn in their book, The Year 2000, which was written in 1967, and they were game theorists and of the Cold War variety. And this was just, they predicted by year 2000 this would happen. It didn't happen, obviously, but we sort of imagined this parallel world in which it did, and sort of that becomes the umbrella for all the projects. And I think that part of the reason we wanted California is that I think so many of the post-war activities that interest us happen in California. I think you have New Age religion, the music counterculture, drug culture, psychedelic culture, but then you have technology, information technology is all happening there, aerospace, the entertainment business. It's sort of this very ripe, like microcosm of all the wild things that have gone on in the 20th century that have then been kind of exported throughout the world and kind of defined our world. I mean, obviously the internet, which was developed there in Silicon Valley, is the most salient example of that now just dominates the world that we live in. And a lot of that came out of the counterculture and some of this like psychedelic drug culture that was going on in that area at the time. So I think that those tensions make this fictional California a very useful tool for us to explore all these different historical themes, ideas, speculative fictions, what have you.